Um, Hello, everyone.
Amazing.
To the goodness me, we're halfway through the day and I can't even count anymore. Well, the fourth session of this inaugural National Drama SEN conference. We are very, very lucky to have Karen Wallace-Jones from Make Sense Theatre and also a fantastic drama teacher in a series of Proust throughout Reading to talk through some really tried and tested ideas. Like I said, this session is split into sort of two parts, which will be involved, Karen, imparting her wisdom and her knowledge, and then some question and answering at the end. We will be taking, that form so that you can write any ideas for future training events, but also for questions for the panel discussion at the end. If you have any sort of questions or concerns, please put them in the chat, direct or indirect. I'm going to work here behind the scenes. And one more time, a massive thank you to the whole executive team at National Drama for making this possible. And an extra special thank you to Carolyn for making the marketing work so well. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do any of this without her help and without everyone's support. So, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Karen. I thought I'd just introduce myself first of all, just so you know a little bit about me. I trained to be a teacher 9 years ago. In a previous life, I trained as an actor, and I did early years storytelling for years. I ran my own business doing that. And I trained to be a teacher through the GTP program, and I actually chose for my second placement to go to a special school, and I completely fell in love with it. And I thought this is where I really belong. And so then I worked at that special school for 8 years, and I ended up running the creative arts department there. It was a fantastic school. I was really fortunate. It was an outstanding school, and I learned from really, really experienced and amazing people. So I feel really lucky I had that experience. And then more recently, I was encouraged. Well, lots of parents said to me there was nothing in the community for young people who were neurodivergent. And what we were able to offer at school was fantastic, but actually when they left school or in the school holidays and outside of school, they kind of, everything sort of dropped off a cliff. There was nothing there for them. So I decided to set up Make Sense Theatre with two colleagues, and we run that locally, and it is making theatre for, by, and with young people with and adults with neurodivergences. And I also work part-time in a PRU now as a drama teacher, something that I really always wanted to do. I felt like it was the next sort of step for me in learning about neurodivergences. And so I will say I am still quite a newbie to the PRU environment, but I'm learning all the time, but I'm still making the mistakes, whereas I would hope I've made lots of the mistakes working in a SEN environment that so that I can kind of tell you about how not to make those mistakes. But I am still making them in the PRU environment. I will say that. But I'm happy to, if you're interested in that work, I'm happy to talk about that as well. What I've tried to do today is think about people in mainstream schools and what that looks like, and how you as a teacher, a drama teacher in a mainstream school, could support a young person with a neurodivergence. Because I think that's where most people are working in this. However, this should apply if you're in a SEN school as well, because everything that I'm going to be talking about, I've done in a SEN environment as well. So I'm now going to try and be technical, which I am not. Here we go. Right. Cool. These are all offers. I'm not saying that I know everything. I'm also not going to presume that I know what it's like in your school, in the mainstream environment. That's not the environment that I know as well. I have worked in mainstream schools, but that's not the environment I know as well as a SEN school. So please stop me at any point and ask me how could I don't think this could work. I don't think this is relevant. I can't see how I could do this. So please stop me anytime to say something like that and let's talk about it. Also, stop me at any point to ask me a question if I'm not making sense. I find it quite hard working on Zoom. I like to be in a room with people moving about and doing stuff. So this isn't my natural environment in which to work with people. So if I'm doing it wrong, please just stop me and say, this isn't making sense. Or put it in the chat. Although, can I see the chat if I'm on this? I don't know. Someone might need to tell me. I'm not technical. Right, so first of all, just thinking about the different neurodivergences, when I was looking up a nice image for this, I came across so many different images with different these different titles in them, these for neurodivergences. So I picked this one, but there are others that include lots of other neurodivergences as well. So in this one, we've got autism, ADHD, you've probably heard of all of these, dyscalculia, dyslexia, epilepsy, developmental language disorder, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, intellectual disability. A lot of young people I worked with have global development delay. So it's kind of like a catch-all term, if you don't know it, for young people who are behind cognitively, but they don't really know why, so they call it that. Tourette's and tic disorders. Quite often you'll see on these charts that anxiety, depression, bipolar, and other mental health issues will come under this, because having a divergence is essentially that having your brain is wired in a different way. So neurotypical people, they have a typical developmental, intellectual, and cognitive ability. A neurodivergent person doesn't. There is a developmental difference. You will have a neurodiverse classroom because you will have neurotypical and neurodivergent young people in there. I quite liked that the abbreviation for neurodivergent is ND, and this is National Drama. I quite like that, so I made sure that was in there. And then there's another term that's bandied about, neurominorities. So those will be in our world. All these in front of us right here on the screen are the neurominorities, really. And then these are all different types of neurotypes. And then I just thought I'd put autistic on here. I don't know if people know that term. I understand that it was coined by autistic people, and it is to describe people who are not autistic. So I am autistic. So
I don't know whether you can see this, Karen, but there is a question in the chat.
I can't see it. Thank
Yes,
you.
somebody's asking
just
what
one
is...
moment. I was going to get to
you? Oh, right. Okay.
So if we, Karen, if you want to tell us where you want us to pause for specific bits for questions, we've got one here about what is alcohol.
Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Is that, I can see it now. Yeah. Sorry. So actually, really interesting that you brought that up, Kira, because there's a guy called Barry Carpenter who is like the Sen guru. If you look him up, he's amazing. And he came into training at my school where I was the head of creative arts. And he has done loads of research into fetal alcohol syndrome. It's essentially what young people are born with if their parents have been substance abusers during pregnancy, if the mum has been a substance abuser. So yeah, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, really interestingly, occurs in 1 in 4 young people, which is the exact same as autism. However, we don't really know about fetal alcohol syndrome, and that really stands out to me. I can remember when he told me that, I thought, why are we not talking about this like we're talking about autism, but it has the exact same prevalence. So yeah, that's something to remember. Right, I'm going to try and keep this chat thing up so I can.
Don't worry, Karen. I'll monitor the chat. I'll come up when there's.
Oh, fine.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
Why is it not letting me? Okay. So what I want to look at is something called sensory processing disorder, because this is something that I think is really important. Or you can see my daughter peering around the door. Something that's really important to think about with our young people that might be neurodivergent. So again, this is something that lots of people don't talk about, I find, or know about. So 1 in 6 children experience sensory challenges that are sufficient to disrupt academic, social, or emotional development. So that's why I think this is important. Sensory processing disorders are more prevalent in autistic young people, but they are as prevalent as ADHD, and they're often not recognized. People obviously often don't recognize that young people have a sensory processing disorder. And I've seen that in the PRU that I'm in now. The young children or young people who are being excluded are coming in, and they all, I would say, have some kind of sensory processing disorder, and it has not been recognized. And that is why they are struggling in school, and that is why they are ending up getting excluded with their behaviors. And anyway, so you've got sensory seekers who are undersensitive to sensory input, and sensory avoiders who are oversensitive. Now, an occupational therapist explained it to me in a really easy way for me to understand. And that's why I've got a picture of a gate. So if I've got to make sure I say this the right way, because even though I understand it, I get it wrong. Some people have their gate too shut, and some people have it wide open. People who are neurodivergent. So if their gate is closed, they are going to be seeking sensory input because their gate for their sensory input is closed. They're going to be seeking it to try and regulate themselves. If their gate is swinging wide open, all the sensory input is coming at them, flooding them, and they are going to be sensory avoidant because it's too much. What you want is to have a nice swing on your gate, and for you to be able to regulate how much your sensory input you're taking in from all your different senses, which we'll look at in a second. It can also be explained as having a big cup or a small cup. So you might have a big cup in where you've got to get lots of sensory input to fill your cup, or you might have a little cup and it might be overflowing because so much comes in and you don't have enough room. So some young people will show a combination of these responses, these reactions. Does that all make sense? Okay, so you've got 8 senses. So we all know about the 5 senses: the tasting, touching, smelling, hearing, seeing. But actually, there are 3 other senses that are really important. And someone might have already talked about this today. You might all know this. I'm sorry if I'm telling you something you already know, but I think this is important to remember if you already do know. So your proprioceptive sense tells you where your body is in space. So when you fall asleep, you might feel a dip in your proprioceptive sense. So that sensation when you're falling asleep and you think you're falling and you jerk, that is when your proprioceptive sense is dipping. Some young people live like this. So in general, those are young people who have more profound, multiple and complex learning difficulties. But you will have young people in a mainstream environment who will have these moments where their proprioceptive sense is dysregulated and it might dip. Then there's your vestibular sense, which tells you about your movement and balance, helps you distinguish from up and down. So for example, if your room magically got stuck on the back of a truck right now and zoomed off, you'd be able to feel the motion of that. People who struggle with their vestibular sense might not be able to know that is happening. They wouldn't feel that motion. And then your interoceptive sense tells you, and it helps you feel what's going on inside your body. So it helps you know if you're hungry, if you're full, hot, cold, thirsty. And then obviously this is affected by stress and trauma. So that's something else to think about. And I always think of it as like a bit like the heartbreak diet. If you're stressed and you can't eat because you don't know you're hungry, that sort of thing. So there may be young people in your class that don't know what they're feeling. They don't just realize they're hungry, but they just feel really rotten. There's something going on. So some or all of these senses may be dysregulated in young people. So your sensory seeking young person in your class who's got that big cup and their gate is closed, you might see that they stand too close when talking to others. They don't have a good sense of personal space. They have an unusual tolerance for pain. They walk with loud, heavy steps. They're going to be crashing and bashing into things. They love all that kind of big movement, jumping, hopping. They're going to want to climb. They don't know their own strength. So they may rip paper when writing, for example. They're kind of like the rough play kids. They want to touch things. Oh, props. Don't get my hands on that. They might touch other people. They're going to want to make loud noises. They're going to want to get that prop that can make a loud noise, and they're going to want to do it all the time. They'll swing on their chair, that vestibular sense. Yeah, they're regulating that. They're going to be chewing potentially on their jumper sleeve, all that kind of thing, or pen lids, their nails. And it actually is their way of trying to regulate. That's quite a hard thing to think when they're driving you potty. That is actually them trying either to stop themselves feeling sluggish, but it's also just helping them to feel more organized in their bodies. They've got this sensation of just disorganization in their bodies and in their space. Yeah, so sensory avoiding. These are your small cup and the gates are wide open and everything's coming in at you. So they're oversensitive or have hypersensitivity. So they're going to experience sensory input much more intensely than the average person, and they're going to avoid it. So they might be your timid young person, don't like to be touched. They might get startled by any loud noises or unexpected, like the lights that come on suddenly in the studio and they didn't know that was going to happen. They might hear things that we don't hear. And interestingly, one of my young people, I'm doing a project and I will touch on it a little bit later with my theatre company, with a group of young people, and it's all about themselves and them telling their stories of themselves. And this young person described being autistic as a bit like being an animal. He said, I feel like we're like animals. We sense things in a much stronger way and it feels like it's like an animal. And he said, I smell things that you can't smell and I can hear things that you can't hear. So that's something also to remember, that you might not realize, that you might not think there's any noises or distracting noises, but you might not hear it, that they might be tuning into something that you don't realize is there. They're going to worry about being bumped when they're lining up or in the corridors. They don't want to be touched by other young people. They're going to probably not like their uniform. There's the potential that it's itchy, it's scratchy, there's labels, it's tight, it's restrictive, it's hot. And they're not going to want they're not going to be the kids that want to dangle off the monkey bars upside down or go on swings or climb on any equipment or anything. And then they're not going to have a sense of where their body is in relation to other people in the space. So there's going to be and objects, there's going to be like a clumsiness about it, and they're going to prefer to be in quieter environments and avoid crowds. Straight away, I'm going ding, 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 drama classroom. Quieter environment? Not really. So yeah, these are the things to think about, which we will look at how we can think about this. So for me, the big thing here is that all of this, if you've got young people who are neurodivergent and or have a sensory processing disorder, they're going to be anxious, they're going to be stressed. I was trying to describe it to my sister, who's a geography teacher in mainstream, and she was asking me about a young person, and she said, I just don't understand why she's so anxious all the time. Tell me what this anxiety is. And I said, think about if you're on the phone, you've just got dressed to go out for an evening and you're having to wear your Spanx and your tights and it's a really hot day and you feel all trussed up and you don't really want to wear that kind of outfit. Then you're on the phone, the doorbell goes, the dog starts barking, your children are shouting, who is it, mum? You're trying to have a conversation with the guy at the door, an ambulance goes past, you step on some dog food that's been dropped in it, and all of this is kind of coming at you and you just want to scream. And it's too much. That is what a lot of young people are having to cope with in the neurotypical mainstream school environment. And that is what they're dealing with all the time. And I think that's something really important to remember, that they are managing They are trying to speak our language, our neurotypical language all day. And when you're in another country and you're speaking another language all day, it's really exhausting. And so if you imagine these young people are trying to speak another language all day long, they are going to be exhausted and they are going to be stressed and they are going to find things hard and there are going to be behaviors that happen from that. So I think if we can just think about in this little session, a way of giving them just that little bit of a break where we try and speak their language just for that one drama session, then it would just be brilliant. So I'm just going to try and give you a few little tips of what you might be able to do just to give them that break from what they're living with all the time. Any questions? No?
Nothing
Okay,
at the moment.
so what, sorry? No?
Nothing,
Okay.
nothing in the
So
chat.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with thinking about before they even enter your space. So if we think about what's home like for them, first of all, a lot of these young people, SEND young people, have really poor sleep. They really struggle with sleep. It's really disrupted. So you've got young people who are tired. You need to think about their bedroom situation. It might be their safe place. That might be their only safe place. So actually going out of their bedroom is a massive thing. Or it might be a place that they don't actually feel comfortable in. They've got to share it with a neurotypical sibling who doesn't get them. Okay, so maybe they're already dealing with that. Maybe their family really gets them and their family is a really safe place for them, and they're having to leave their family and go somewhere where they don't feel safe and they don't feel understood. Or maybe their family is also very neurotypically run and they don't get their young person. They've had to get ready, all those things you have to do. If you've got executive functioning difficulties and you're having to brush your teeth and you have to do your hair, and what that sensory sensation of brushing your teeth makes you feel funny. Yeah. You're having to put on a uniform that you don't like and you feel uncomfortable in. You're having to remember to have your breakfast, get your books together, everything, all of that is big already. Then your journey to school, you're thinking about all the sensory input that's happening on a bus journey, all that sensory stuff that could be happening, or walking to school, or in the car. Again, they might have had a really great, calm car journey with mum who really understands them, but then they're having to open that door and go out of that safe place. Then the transition before they come to your class. Crowded corridors. My children go to the school that I trained to be a teacher at, and I can visualize the corridor they tell me, which is outside the drama classroom, where the children crowd surf over, that they get the year 7s and they crowd surf over them because it's like a bottleneck outside the drama classroom, and they all have to line up and they get absolutely smushed in there, and it's horrible. I didn't even like walking down that corridor. So I'm sure you can visualize some of those crowded corridors and those bottlenecks of young people. Then they have to really think about where and what next. Where do they go? Some schools are huge. They've had to have the bell go. So when I'm in my SEND school, there was no bell, because that is a huge stressor for a lot of young people. So they've had to deal with the sound of the bell. There's that sense of urgency. You've got to get somewhere. You've got to know where you're going. You've got to remember all of that. What does it smell like in a school, in a corridor? And they're having to maybe line up and wait outside. So again, there's all sensory stuff there. What's happened in the lesson before? Maybe they loved it. Young people with neurodivergencies often hyper-focus on things. They might have been absolutely loving that lesson, and then the bell went and they're told it's done. They don't want to do that, but they want to focus on that science lesson that was amazing. I can't put my head into drama now. How can I do that? So the transition is going to be huge, or maybe something went really bad, things that we know as teachers anyway, that we have to think about what's happened before. Are there friendship issues or whatever? But these are just all things to remember before they even come into your space. And then inside your space, drama classrooms are generally very different from other classrooms. And young people who are neurodivergent will struggle to get the rules potentially of the different classroom. What happens in here? 'Cause they might know in the other classroom, you sit behind a desk, you sit down and face the front, and there's a whiteboard, and it's all very straightforward. What are the rules in this class? Is it really free? Do we take shoes off? Think about that. I know some people take shoes off in drama studios. Think about the smell element from that as a sensory thing as well. You know, what are we sitting on the floor? Are we sitting on chairs? It's all very different. It's a very big room. When I worked in my SEND school, I had a really tiny drama studio, like a dinky, sweet, lovely one. But because it was different and it had these dark, gross purple walls, and it had lights and it had curtains, it was such a distraction for some young people as when they came in, because it was so different from all the other rooms. They would stare at the walls and they'd touch the walls, and and I know obviously these young people had more profound neurodivergences than those that will be in a mainstream school, but it will still be there, this kind of distraction by the room being different. Maybe there's no windows. Again, that could be quite claustrophobic. I think it could be for anyone, neurotypical or neurodivergent. It's just a different space. So just thinking about that. Some drama studios are enormous, I've seen. Again, that could be quite unsettling. Then the colours. So if you think about all the display boards, think about those that have got that sensory input flooding in at them as they come in, and there's display boards everywhere, and there's patterns, and there's lights, and so apparently blues and greens are really good. And so our display boards in the SEND school were very often muted blues and greens. They've got a calming effect. And we would keep those to a minimum in the classroom as well. I didn't really have displays in my studio at all, actually, and I would quite often just pull the black curtains around to keep it very, very simple, straightforward, non-distracting. Equipment, again, that's going to be all different and interesting and distracting, and what is that and why is that there, and I want to touch that, and there might be a smell coming from it. I know the smell when you've had lights on in the drama studio, there's a smell that comes from that. The acoustics are different. Yeah, and I've talked about the smell of the shoes. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to go on to actually getting into the nitty-gritty of a drama lesson, unless people have questions. I don't actually know what time I'm on. Oh, good. Okay.
No questions yet, but it might be interesting, those of you that you know, are teaching, just to put into the chat what your drama space is like. COVID different in your normal teaching. How is that space? It'd be interesting to get sort of to see what it's like, because I think some of the points that Karen's raised are really, really interesting. I mean, we know a lot from cognitive load theory that this overstimulation, not just for all students, is unnecessary. So put in the chat there what your drama studio is like.
Are we going to look at that now, Chris? Or are we going to look at that at the end?
We'll look at that at the end, yeah. Okay.
So I pulled this off Tinternet, starters, about starters, because I thought, well, what's the point of why do we have starters again? And found this came up straight away on some department education. Starters exploit the prime learning time at the beginning of lessons when pupils are often at their most receptive and concentration levels are high. I totally disagree with that. I don't think when neurodivergent pupils come into a classroom, they are at their most receptive and their concentration levels are high. I actually think that's when they struggle the most. And in our SEND school, we had the absolute good fortune of loads of TAs who, as a child would enter the space, they would be able to give them deep massage in their hands as they came in, or put a sensory weighted blanket on their lap, or give them a fiddle toy as they came in, because coming in from all of that transition into the new space, all the change was just too much, and they needed that time to really settle. And we needed to take the time and realize that we could not start any learning until those young people had started to regulate themselves and their senses. And we had one young lad who would do something called a splat. And I think that this is I love this word. I think that young people need to come in and they need to splat in their own way. So this young lad, every time he came to my drama studio, he would jump and he would splat himself on the ground with a big scream, and he would do it repeatedly. And we had to figure out a way, how could we help him get his splat out as part of what we were doing, rather than just splatting as we're trying to play a game or we're trying to do something to get the lesson started. So I think that we need to remember that neurodivergent young people have to splat either quietly, their own quiet splat, or they might need to do a big splat. So, I will, bear with, I'm coming to that. I also found this. The purpose of a starter is to grab the student's attention at the very start of the lesson. It's a hook to get them settled and focus on what's happening in the day's lesson. Making connections with prior learning and sharing objectives and outcomes are part of a good starter. So I find things like grab, hook, like just too much for a starter. I think for young people with neurodivergences, I think we need to think that they need to get settled. So I like that. They need to make connections, but I would say they need to make connections with you as a teacher, and they need to make connections with the space, and they need to make connections with the young people that are around them. But I think really importantly, they need to make connections with you, because they need to feel safe. And that is really, really important. They need to trust that they are safe in this different space where they've transitioned in an unsafe kind of way through the crowd surf their way into your studio, had to take their shoes off, which they don't like doing because they like the pressure of really tight shoelaces on them. They like wearing their shoes on the wrong feet because that gives them that sensory bit of input or whatever, and you've made them take their shoes off or whatever. So they need to really feel safe. And I think a massive part of that is connecting with you in some way. And I would also agree that sharing objectives and outcomes is also really important, because they need to know what they're going to do that day. They need to know, they need to get all the information, because that will reduce the anxiety as well. So, starter adjustments, going back to the splat as well. So I think, thinking about some starter adjustments for neurodivergent young people, it's about making connections, feeling safe, and trying to regulate our sensory input. So I have found in the PRU, every young person that's come to me, they're either SEN or they're undiagnosed SEN. And as I said, there's sensory processing disorders across the board. They all say to me, I don't call it drama anymore, I call it social arts, because the word drama is absolutely terrifying to them. And I realized they'd see it up on the board and they said, I'm not doing that, I'm not going in that room, I'm not doing drama. So I said to my boss, change it, I want to call it social arts. So they don't know what that is. So they've got no preconceived idea, because drama is literally like a traumatic thing for them. And they all say, are you going to make me go do something in a big circle across everyone? You're going to make me perform in front of everyone? You're going to make me pretend to be a blah, blah, blah in front of everyone? You're going to make me do this? Blah, blah, blah. So the big group element, I think, is too unsafe. It's too scary. And as I say, these are offers. These are my offers to you. And I have done these with SEN young people as well. So yeah, but offers. So do say that's not going to work if you think it's not going to work, and we can talk about it. I think small group work. So rather than doing the big game, you create groups. You're standing up, you're controlling the room, you can see what everyone's doing, you can go up and make those connections, choose those groups. So you might have the big splatters that need to play the game. So let's say the game is, like I've put here, like freeze improv, or what are you doing? Okay, to get them going. Some of them can play that with all the big splats. So they can be the loud, they can be the pushing, they can do the rough play in their group all together. Then you get the ones that need to do the quiet splat. They need to chill. They need to have that, they're the timid ones. They can play it in their way. Yeah, and the teacher can move around, circulate, make those connections with the individual child. And then you can also start bringing in, because I know we all want to, with a starter, start bringing in the learning for that day. So then you start playing that game. So you play the game and it's literally just start to regulate all those sensory things, and then add in a layer. And with SEN anyway, it needs to all be these tiny little layers anyway. Everything you do needs to you need to add the tiny bit on, and then add a tiny bit on, and add a tiny bit on. It can't ever be a massive jump. So this is a nice way to add another little layer. Now let's play it again in your groups. But I want you now to be influenced by the music I'm about to play. As you, whatever you're doing, whatever game you're playing, I want you to just see, how does that music change how you play it? Or you can only play pulling something out of the box or whatever it's going to be, but things that would have only existed in 1942 because you're doing something on evacuees or something. Or you can only, you've got to be in character from someone from the play. And when you're playing the name game, you've got to use the names of the characters, but you've got to respond in character, or whatever it is. So adding in a little layer then, but I feel like that works because it gives everyone a chance to chill. It's a smaller, safer group. It's not that big group where they feel that they are having to perform and they're being judged, and they're being looked at, and it's scary and it's big. It's much smaller, and also you can kind of pick your groups quite well for the small or big splatters. That's my offer. Okay, so main activities. I'm guessing that people still in mainstream do the making, performing, responding kind of structure. That's what I do generally a lot of the time, but with SEN as well, it kind of follows the same kind of thing. You're going to create something, you're going to share it, and we're going to work on our evaluation skills. So I think these need a bit of tweaking to work for neurodivergent young people, or a little thought needs to go into how you could make it work for them. So in the making section, again, it's about making it safe. So first of all, when you're giving instructions, you have to really think about our language. So like you've got to almost have like a translator in your head thinking, would that make sense? There was somebody I was supporting, somebody running a workshop at my PRU yesterday, and it was someone from a theatre that had come in, and she kept using the term about mirroring someone else's body language, and I could just see it was just, but for her using the word mirroring was quite straightforward. So I said the same, you would do the same. And it's just things like that, like, am I actually, because inclusion is helpful for everyone. It is actually really helpful if we keep our language simple and we think about what we're saying, and if we're being really, really clear. So, and being really, really clear with what you say, making it simple instructions, one after the other, having them displayed visually as well, it's really important. And if you can have it up, this is what we're going to do today. So when they come in, they can see, first of all, we're going to play blah, blah, blah in groups. Then we're going to do this task. Then we're going to do this task. And it's up for them to see from the moment they come in, those kids that suffer with the anxiety of not knowing and needing things to be predictable, that is going to help them straight away. There's going to be a bit of anxiety gone. Checking understanding, I think we all do this anyway, but if a young person in the room is telling you something, and we could do this and we could do that, and they're using all language that you might need to translate for someone, saying, if someone in this room didn't know what blah blah word meant, could you explain to them, how would you explain it to them? Setting up the task, so giving them, making sure that they know there's an end point. So that might be like a visual timer up on the board. We actually, in a sense, will use like sand timers because that works a treat. If you've got something that can count down, but they know the end point, I'm going to ask you to do this, you're going to work on this for 7 minutes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to come back together as a group and we're going to blah, blah, blah. Low focused language for me is about, I always think about not turning it into something massive. So we're just going to have a go. We're just going to have a go at this. So it's not a task. It's not, the game is okay. We're going to have a go at this game, or let's just try. So it's like a let's, Young people who have PDA, again, you can't make it, which is pathological demand avoidance, which is a form of autism. They cannot cope with any demand being put on them. There are plenty of young people in mainstream school with PDA, and so the word let's is your friend. Let's just all try, because you can't say, I need you to do this now. What we're going to do now is let's just have a go at this. Yeah, let's. So it's all like really like low focus. We're not making a big deal of this, because anything that's kind of on them, it's going to just add to those anxieties and behaviours. Modelling always. I was fortunate, obviously in a SEND school, had a TA, and I had a specific subject specialist TA who I would drag up, and we always showed everything that we needed the young people to do. If you've got a young person in your class who is really wanting to do drama GCSE, or they really want to do theatre, A-level theatre studies, they're really keen bean, they're gifted and talented, you want to stretch them, whatever, use these young people to model with you. Always model. It just changes things. If you show them what you want, have a go at it first of all, even with games, model it really quickly. Do you remember this game? Come over here, let's quickly do it. So when I say this, I'm going to remember, and then you're going to say that, and then we're going to da-da-da-da. A familiar routine works a treat as well. So if you did the same starter for the whole term, but maybe you just changed that extra layer each time, so they knew for a whole term, I'm going to come in, I'm going to sit in a circle, I'm going to be with those people, we're going to play the blah, blah, blah game, and then I know Miss or Sir is going to add in another layer. But they already know a massive part of what they're going to be asked of them. So that's really good. And they know they just have to cope with the unpredictability of just that added little layer. And letting them know that as well. So this scheme of work for this term, we're going to be doing this every single week. Same, it's going to be the same. So we're all going to know what we're doing. That's great. You can come straight in and you'll know what you're doing. Choice. Autistic young people quite often need choice. It helps them to feel in control. Again, that's that unpredictability, the anxiety of not being in control. So it's like, okay, when in the group work, you can choose to do this or this. Okay, 2 choices, that's it. Lots of young people can't cope with more than 2, just 2. You can choose to do this role in this or this, that's it. And that gives them some kind of control. And I would add to that, and if they're sort of umming and ahhing, to say their name. Okay, James is going to be, okay, so James is going to do, and then they just have to fill in the end. And then that's helpful as well for them to make the decision. So yeah, and also motivators. So is there something that you can motivate? And this, again, I'm teaching you to suck eggs. Teachers all know this, but this does work with young people with neurodivergences. So what can they work towards? We had a lovely young person in my school who was obsessed with Grundon bins. So he worked towards getting to film the bin lorries coming and emptying the bins. And we always just showed him a picture of the bins, and off he trotted and would do all his work. Slightly different, I know, in mainstream, but there's going to be some motivators there. And then in the performing section, so remember, yeah, so this is a transition. Again, you're transitioning within your lesson, which is going to be hard. They might have been hyper focused on the creating bit and really into something, and then you're saying end, hopefully with a visual timer, and them knowing that there's an end point there that won't have happened, but you've still got to be aware of that. So you've got to make it feel safe. Performing, such a massive anxiety inducing thing for the young people at my Prue. I cannot get them to perform. They really detest it, and they feel like they said everyone makes fun of you, people laugh, it's just a chance for people to take the mick out of you. In school, it's just horrendous. They absolutely are like traumatized by the performance element of drama. So I was thinking of different ways. How can we make this low focus for them? So again, it's the whole shall we share? So not look, let's watch, let's perform. That's all like on you. Let's just share. Performance carousel. I was thinking that maybe that's quite a nice one. So there's a less of a formal audience, so where you can do performance carousel, where you just kind of get everyone, there's no sit down and be the audience and then there's the stage. It's everyone in their groups, and from where you are, just from where you are, do you want to come over, just have a look at what they're going to share, and move on to the next one. Getting involved. I have never sat down in any of my drama lessons as a SEND teacher. I swept through the whole thing, doing everything with them. And I think that that's not always an option, but I think getting involved in some way is really great because it shows that you're willing to do what you're asking of them to do. Could you give a time on the performance? I just want to see, can we just see 30 seconds? Oh, I've just said just see, don't you see? Let's just share 30 seconds. So they've got an endpoint. Or like, I had the idea of a masterclass, which I've done, which works quite often, where you sort of say to a group as they're working, you've been going around in the making section, would you mind if I used you as like a masterclass? And I'm going to come in with you. Maybe I could perform. Do you think I could you find a part for me? So you get in there, you perform with them, or you don't, and you do all the learning from just sharing one piece. So everyone gets a chance to work on theirs. Maybe you just performance carousel, but then you pick one where you can kind of do a masterclass on whatever the learning there is that day with a group who they might all be neurotypical, or they might and be absolutely fine, or there might be some neurodivergent young people in there, but you've given them the warning, you've agreed with them, or you've said, can I hop into the scene as well? Is there something I could do? And then you're there to do it alongside them. And that is like a supportive, safe thing to do. Or paired groups, could paired groups share with each other? So that, and you know, you could pair up groups that will be kind to each other, will be understanding. And yeah, give it warning about any changes. So if you're going to change up this, you've seen you're running out of time or whatever, and you're going to have to do something, it's always good to give warnings because change is hard. How much time have I got? Oh goodness, right, okay. Responding. So it's another transition, got to make it safe. I think this really needs to be modelled for a very long time. I worked in a mainstream school for the last autumn term, and I just think it was just like an opportunity for them to sort of slag each other off. It was like, yeah, I couldn't hear anything he said. Couldn't see his face. I mean, what, you know, and I just thought, you just don't, yeah, this is not useful. So I think it needs to be modelled for a very long time, almost before they're allowed to do it. So is there like, it's like thinking of different ways of framing the feedback? Is there something this group has helped you remember we must do? So the negative into the positive. So it's like a culture of getting things wrong, being positive and helpful. Yeah. And if somebody points out something negative about someone, I couldn't see them. They had their back to the, you know, to the audience the whole time, and everyone starts sniggering. Oh my goodness, thank you. That is such a useful thing to the person who they've criticized. Thank you for doing that. It was so useful that you did that. I mean, again, I'm teaching teachers to suck eggs here, but you know, it's all about this. You know, this is fantastic. We have this opportunity. I'm so grateful to you for doing that, because actually that's given me this amazing opportunity in front of everyone. So this person is amazing for making a mistake. And they're also like games like, you can play games where getting things wrong is celebrated. So the game where you in pairs, you say 1, 2, 3, and then you replace 2 with a clap, 3 with a jump. And every time you get it wrong in your pair, you all cheer. Yeah, whoa, 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 high five, fist bump. Or eyes up, eyes down is another game, and normally you die, but instead of that, you look at the person and you go, yo, dude, or whatever. So it's like positive. If we die in a game, if we get it wrong, if we're out, it's a cool thing, it's a positive thing. I always say to my young people, there's no right or wrong, because you see them freeze. If I ask a question, they freeze, bunny and headlights. I said, there's no right or wrong answer to this. There's no right or wrong answer, remember? And I heard one of my young people who's now at my youth theatre that I run, I heard him telling a new person, there's no right or wrong in drama. I thought, oh, he remembers. And I know sometimes there is right or wrong, you know, correct, did use placards. So, you know, there are some situations where that doesn't quite work. But what was it? And you don't need lines to steal the show. So acting is about listening as much as speaking. So finding places, finding opportunities for those young people that just can't speak. They cannot perform and speak, and to point out to everyone that this is actually a really important skill, and making sure everyone has opportunities where they don't speak. and they are listening. Acting is about listening, not as much as speaking. So it's not always the young person who can't speak being the person who doesn't speak. The big performers have to do that too. I'm going to keep trucking. Sorry. Approaching a text and devising multi-sensory approach. I always do it. So I always set the play up by bringing in things that they can touch, they can smell, music, sound effects, things they can taste to immerse them in the environment of the world. That's one of the first things I do. They absolutely love it. And it's about speaking their language. We're all born as sensory beings before we become linguistic beings. When we're babies, so we've all got that in us to be a sensory being. So, it speaks to everyone in the room. Make sure you use photographs and have footage of the world of the piece. It really brings it to life. They can't quite picture. I set a Macbeth in like East End of London, and we just had pictures everywhere of what it would look like where they were, and it really helped them, and it helped them come up with ideas. I think we're in a tube station for this scene. Fab, cool, because they were looking at all the different things to do with London that we came up with. Whoosh stories, I think for them to know a story before you break it down is really important for them. So I use whoosh stories all the time, and then they know the story from the outset. Pictures of characters. So you're going to be a nurse. Okay, what does a nurse look like? Or this person is a fireman. Just like concrete things that they can see, and that is who I'm being. Okay, right. Ghosting when working with a script, I think it's called ghosting, so that someone finds it hard to read a script and act at the same time, so you've got someone feeding the line for them. That's really useful to use. And don't underestimate young people. They absolutely love Shakespeare and Greek tragedy. They love the big stories. My young people have just been amazing at Shakespeare. Amazing. They absolutely love it. So yeah, that's props. I always use props in my shows. So we might have umbrellas. Everyone's got umbrellas, and they've got to create the world of the play just from umbrellas. Or chairs that fold up and down, and we turn them into urinals. We have it in a prison, and they were the doors that open and shut together. They were trays in the canteen. The kids love it. Give them something to hang on to and think about. Makes them much more creative. And it just really works with neurodivergent brains. It just really, really does. And it's low focus on them because they start thinking about the prop more, and they think less about themselves. And it's quite complicit. But remember to give them the opportunity to use actual prop where possible. So the e.g. baby seat is for me. I'm doing a show at the moment, and a young person, we're using frames, picture frames as our prop. And we were saying to him, you're coming in, it's a car seat, like a baby car seat. He just couldn't. So I went on FreeCycle, got a car seat, brought it in the next time. He played with it. Now his frame looks so like a baby car seat. He's just got it. So that's really give them the actual item, and it really, really helps. Always use music. So familiarity of recall. So maybe the same piece of music as they come in the class for the scheme of work. So that helps them go, okay, I remember now. I know what we're doing. Yes, we're doing this thing, and it's set in 1900, so she always plays that music or whatever. Could be for a calming effect as they come in. You could use it for transition. So I used to use the Simpsons theme tune for I wanted them to all come and gather together and sit down. They knew that was the cue, and I didn't have to say anything. Or I'd use the BBC News. Beep, beep, beep. So if that meant they needed to be quiet and I needed to add something to tell them whilst they were working and creating their piece. To help them understand, tell and remember stories. Music is so speaks to these young people, and we can do whole scenes without speaking, just tell it under the song that tells the story, or it helps them know what's coming next. So I always have music between each scene in my shows with them, because that helps them know what's next. Also helps with the understanding of emotions. If you play the music and say, this is how this character's feeling right now, really helps them. Sparks creativity, so use it for them to create something from, as we do anyway. And it also lifts scenes and shows. It's my little trick. Just if they're in a show and you just can't get that energy right, I just underscore it with the music. Some other bits, scripts, this is like practical stuff, not in the top corner with the staple, because they can't do, I've just seen time and time again, they just get confused. Staple it like a book. So they can turn over and they know it's there and there, double-sided. Highlight the lines for them beforehand. Otherwise, they just really struggle. Who am I? Where am I? They can't on the page have that highlighted for them. Remember that costume and hair for shows could be tricky. Very often, they are amazing at pulling it out the bag and coping with their sensory issues to get a costume on or to get their hair done for a show. Spots are really good for shows as well, like PE spots. So if they struggle to know where to go, put a spot using spots on the stage, maybe even with a picture of their face on it, so they know that's the one they need to go to, or a colour. You're always the yellow spot, and have those out, or just to kind of contain them in the classroom or on the spot. Scaffold games, character, emotion, activity options. I have no idea what I'm saying. Oh, I know what I'm saying. Yeah, so if they're playing like improv games, don't know what I'm going to do in improv. Have something, maybe you could have like a selection of characters on the wall or emotions or something, that there's some way of them accessing some scaffolding there without it being too obvious, that they could just pick and go, oh yeah, I'll be the angry toddler. Formulas. So in this scene, we've got a doctor and it's a birth scene, and he stands at position 1, and then the nurse is at position 3, and the midwife is at position 4, and then we're going to do another birth scene, and now so you're the doctor, you're going to go from position 1, and now you're going to go over and you're going to be in position 4 because you're this character in this scene. So like formulas, so remember you're going to go to the 1 position, to the 9 position, to the 7 position. Information beforehand wherever you can, whether that's a play, whether that's your class, whatever. The more they know beforehand, the better. Visually as well, if you can back up whatever you're saying visually on there, on the boards, on the wall, whatever, that's really helpful. Always an endpoint. They know when the exit is. Remember that change is really, really hard for young people with neurodivergences. Color contrast on text for key things. If you've got things on your board, make sure there's a strong color contrast with something you really want to ping out to them. And be playful, be silly, laugh. These young people are in like flight or fight mode, like people that suffer with trauma. It's a very similar thing. So it's about getting in there and being fun and joining in, and that's really, really helpful. And where am I? Woo! That's the last one. Just to remember the importance of small steps with these young people. You've got to have lots of rungs of the ladder. You can't make the big leap. Sorry, I sped up at the end.
Thank you so much, Karen. That was, again, massive thing to get through, and you've given us so many things, and I think everyone can really, really appreciate the level of detail, but also having this recorded and having access to your slides will mean that they'll be able to look and they'll be able to pull things apart there. I'm conscious that there's about 4 minutes left before we need to get to the next session. I think there was a couple of things that pulled out there that I think we should all bear in mind, and it's been repeated again and again and again every single session. The joined up nature, how important we need to be. It's not just you and the kids. There's the family. There's the wider school community, the wider community in general. We've seen that now in every session. That joined up thinking is important. The all behavior is communication. Again, that's come up again and again and again. What's the reasons behind it? We also need to remember that, this, when we look at neurodivergence as a thing, we also need to remember that adolescence itself as a stage of neurological development is difficult. The explosion of the prefrontal cortex means that majority of adolescents, when they arrive in that year 7, they are unable to stand up straight. That's not because they're lazy. That is because the myelin sheaths have not been fully formed. So these kind of standing up straight and these behaviors that school expects of them have not been fully developed. And so, if that's happening in neurotypical learners, you can imagine the exponential difficulty that's going on. So again, as we've kept saying again and again today, what you do for these learners will improve outcomes for all learners, because an inclusive classroom is good for everyone. And the only way to really narrow the gap is to just not provide provision for neurotypical students if you really want to narrow a gap, because what's going to happen is provide things for everyone and everyone's going to get better. The gaps that are going to still exist are going to be there. We shouldn't fixate on the gaps. We should fixate on making our classrooms inclusive and then asking those questions. What else can I do for the individual? And I think Karen's given us loads of things that, you know, how can we make it more individual? How can we think about those learners in our classroom? So I'm going to have to say now a massive round of applause, a virtual round of applause for Karen there. Thank you so much for all that. I'm going to stop the recording now. We're going to go to the final session before the panel discussion with Lana. Thank you so much for coming here. I'm going to close this down and then we will join the next session in 2 minutes' time. Thank you.